reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Le Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Le Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. France heads to a hung parliament and political uncertainty as left-wing coalition emerges the biggest force, pushing far right to third place and leaving no party with a majority. Russian President Vladimir Putin hosts Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he makes his first visit to the country since the beginning of the Ukraine war. After meeting Russia's Vladimir Putin last week, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban makes a surprise visit to Beijing to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. Leader of Kenya's doomsday cult Paul Mackenzie goes on trial at a Mombasa court on charges of terrorism over the deaths of over 400 of his followers. And Hurricane Beryl makes landfall in the U.S. state of Texas, forcing the closure of major oil ports, flight cancellations as authorities warn of a deadly storm. Hello and welcome. We start with West Africa, a coup center of the continent that has been reeling under violence, insurgency, and faces serious security concerns. To address these issues, on Sunday, the regional leaders met in Nigeria for the ECOWAS summit. That's the regional bloc economic community of West African states. But leaders of 3 countries were missing from the annual meet: the junta chiefs of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. On the eve of the summit, these 3 nations announced their own alliance, calling it a Confederation of Sahel States. With this, the military chiefs gave a clear signal that they have no intention to be a part of ECOWAS. In January this year, the military chiefs announced they were quitting the bloc, but there was no official meeting. On Saturday, these leaders held their first summit in Niger's capital, Niamey, coinciding with the ECOWAS Leaders Summit.
The formal approval of the treaty creating the Confederation Alliance of Sahel States will mark the culmination of our people's aspirations to seal a union of states sharing the same challenges and ambitions on the bedrock of a Sahelian space.
Now, Niger's military chief went on to say that the people of the country have irrevocably turned their backs on ECOWAS. The 3 nations now also seek greater cooperation across a wide range of sectors. ECOWAS has responded by saying that the move risks disintegration and worsening insecurity in West Africa. It says it will push junta leaders to reconsider their decision. Otherwise, it would impose further hardships on their citizens.
We have convened this ordinary session to once again review the situation in our region. We are aware of the enormous challenges, including terrorist activities and violent extremism, threatening to spread from Sahel region towards the coastal states, especially those that witnessed constitutional changes of government. The decision of the three Sahel countries of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger to withdraw from ECOWAS has also been noticed.
Now, ECOWAS is a 15-nation bloc in West Africa. It's headquartered in Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria. It was formed in 1975 to promote region's economic interest. In the next few years, the bloc shifted focus to political stability in the continent, which it believed was a prerequisite for economic stability and growth. So it also took responsibility to ensure democracy and to fight security challenges. Though it gained success, ECOWAS's performance has weakened in recent years. The bloc has not been able to mitigate coups in the region. Consecutive coups in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso raised doubts over the bloc's goals. It has not been able to counter the surge of terrorism and insurgency in the region. It is also losing public support, with many West Africans seeing it as failing to represent their interests. The group has a history of military intervention in turmoil-hit areas, but sometimes it had been accused of mismatched timing. Now, while announcing their withdrawal from the bloc, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso cited a few reasons. They accused ECOWAS of illegal, illegitimate, inhumane, and irresponsible sanctions imposed on them after the coups. They highlighted ECOWAS' failure to assist them in their existential fight against terrorism and insecurity. The juntas have also argued that ECOWAS has deviated from the founding principles of the organization and is now controlled by foreign powers. This statement comes as all three military governments have expelled troops of ex-colonial power France from their nations. They have turned instead towards what they call their sincere partners, Russia, Turkey, and Iran. Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have signed a security pact with Moscow, and Russian instructors have been training the armies for their fight against terrorism. The U.S. is also in the process of removing all of its forces in the region. America withdrew its forces and equipment from a small military base in Niamey. Now, fewer than 500 remaining troops will leave a critical drone base in Niger in August, ahead of a September 15th deadline. For now, ECOWAS does not seem to have a clear strategy in response to the action by three West African junta chiefs. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, who has been re-elected as the bloc's chair, has reportedly called on Senegal's new leader to serve as a special envoy with Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger without providing any details. ECOWAS leaders say the move threatens the loss of millions of dollars of funding for the bloc. As well as hampering freedom of movement, it would also disrupt the work of the long-proposed regional force to tackle terrorism in the region. However, it looks certain that the three military leaders will not join hands with ECOWAS members for dealing with their crises. Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Freedom Onuwaha. He is a professor at the Department of Political Science at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. He is joining us live from Nigeria. Thank you for being with us, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
Let's jump right in. The leaders of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have started their own alliance. How does this new Confederation of Sahel States affect the regional stability? Will this cause disintegration in the region?
Yes, I think to a very large extent, we can really argue that ECOWAS, since its formation in 1975, has never found itself at a juncture or a crossroad like this, because essentially things are moving very fast, meteoric speed in terms of the way and manner in which the three countries, that is Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, the military leaders are moving fast to exit from ECOWAS. And that in itself has a lot of implications from the point of view of international law. A certain immediate termination of their membership of ECOWAS contravenes Article 91 of the ECOWAS revised treaty, which calls on member states wishing to exit the group to give it at least 1 year notice. And I'm sure that these three countries, I'm talking about Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, was only in January this year that they informed ECOWAS that they're exiting. And I do not think ECOWAS took that threat serious until the summit, the joint summit they had on the 6th of this month, wherein they have made it clear and irrevocably that they're exiting the ECOWAS. And that has a lot of implications from the point of view of international law. First, I don't think ECOWAS will try to take any aggressive approach to getting them back. Second, again, I think it raises a lot of questions as it has to do with the issue of integration, economic integration, trading, since there are some treaties that this country have signed up to that are still subsisting and their citizens are enjoying. For example, the ECOWAS Treaty on free movement of persons. And so if they have irrevocably left ECOWAS, that raises a lot of questions as to how ECOWAS is going to implement this treaty on free movement of persons. But I think a much more fundamental challenge is the question about how will ECOWAS cooperate with these countries. Particularly, I'm concerned about how ECOWAS is going to develop an approach that's going to relate with Niger. Niger is quite important, as you know, and Niger is one of the 5 troop contributing countries to the multinational joint task force that is dealing with the problem of the Boko Haram in the Chad region. And the implication, therefore, is that if Niger would then pull out from the ECOWAS, go ahead, please.
Right, Professor. What is the reaction by ECOWAS members to these junta-ruled nations effectively and irrevocably turning their backs on ECOWAS?
ECOWAS have actually adopted an approach that is conciliatory and forward-looking in the event of the recent announcement that they're irrevocably leaving ECOWAS, which is quite commendable compared to the prior confrontational aggressive approach that ECOWAS took. And for the fact that ECOWAS have already mandated the president of Senegal to continue negotiation, does suggest that ECOWAS will continue on the track of diplomacy, on the track of conciliation and constructive engagement to deal with the potential exit of this trial. And I think it's in the interest of all the actors to explore more democratic, more open negotiation in terms of dealing with the problem, because that's going to create a whole lot of challenge at the strategic level, at the political level, at the security level, and even in aspect of economic cooperation. Recall also that these 3 countries constitute about 50% of the territory called ECOWAS. So exiting in such a sudden manner will really impact on the overall economic health, political health, and even the security temperature of the region. So I think conciliation, negotiation, constructive engagement hold the greatest potentials for resolving the problem.
Yeah, and you have touched on it, but ECOWAS was formed to promote economic interests in the region and, of course, to ensure stability and democracy. However, critics say that its performance has been on the decline in recent years. What is your opinion on this, and has this perhaps led to these breakaway states?
I think I am persuaded to agree with the critics that ECOWAS has not really reinvented itself in the light of shifting geopolitical and geostrategic landscape in the region, as well as the democratic backsliding we are seeing. ECOWAS has not been forward-looking in terms of its posture, in terms of its engagement. And I say this because primarily ECOWAS was established to facilitate economic integration, and then they moved towards facilitating political stability, and then began to embrace the issue of consolidation of democracy. To a very large extent, one can argue that ECOWAS is the foremost, most developed regional economic community in Africa in terms of the tools and instruments it has articulated, in terms of normative framework it has articulated for consolidation of democracy. But in reality, I think in the last decade, ECOWAS has not been able to reinvent itself. We have seen cracks and incidents of undemocratic tendencies on the part of West African leaders who were elected and then they wanted to undermine the democratic process. And we didn't see ECOWAS come out strongly to call out to these African leaders. I can quickly mention the experience of Guinea under Alpha Conde, and again, you can easily mention the most recent was the very tragic experience West Africans was looking at the way and manner things were progressing in Senegal. And if not that Senegal has a very robust civil society and a very highly professional military, I think Senegal would have also joined the League of West African countries under military rule. So I think ECOWAS need to reinvent itself. ECOWAS need to adopt, a forward-looking posture, need to be prepared, courageous enough to call out West African leaders that are actually displaying all these tendencies of unconstitutional changes of government, tenure elongations, manipulation of the electoral process, because in itself, these undemocratic tendencies in member states are raising a whole lot of legitimacy crisis for ECOWAS.
Right. Thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for bringing us all the latest.
Thank you so very much.
And now shifting our focus to Kenya. We've been getting you the continuous coverage of the protests in the country against President William Ruto and his policies. Protests against the now scrapped tax hikes have grown into calls for the resignation of President William Ruto. Influenced by no political party, these protests have been unique. The demonstrations have been completely led by youngsters and Gen Z. We have been telling you how social media played an important role in these protests, right from influencing, coordinating to live streaming the protests. Now, President Ruto is using the same means to reach out to the youth of the country. For the first time, they had a one-on-one debate with the President Ruto. The interaction was organized via a feature on social media platform X called Spaces. It allows users to host live audio conversations with others. President William Ruto interacted with over 150,000 people. He spoke to many of them one-on-one. Now, the meeting was hosted by an ex-user who goes by the name Osama Atero. He has been a key voice during the protests. The X-Space session was dubbed as #EngageThePresident. The event started with glitches. Many struggled to connect, and the debate started over an hour late, which eventually cut the whole 3-hour engagement. But the protesters did not let go of the remaining time. They bombarded Ruto with tough questions, calling him a liar, accusing him of lacking empathy. Protesters were very direct. They questioned Ruto on the protest deaths, police brutality, and the government response. Ruto, for the very first time, apologized for the police crackdown on the protesters. At one time, he said that he agreed that some officials displayed obnoxious opulence and that he was personally advising them how to conduct themselves. Well, talking about opulence, the Kenyan president himself is known for that. He has been slammed for his extravagant lifestyle. He is in fact known as a flying president who in 20 months went on 62 visits to 38 countries. But coming back to the debate, Ruto said an investigation is underway on the protest deaths and violence. He also accused some reckless people of inflating the number of deaths, and he also assured protesters the finance bill that introduced the tax hikes has indeed been withdrawn. Some protesters feared it still might become law after 21 days as it had been passed by Parliament. The debate ended with many left without speaking, but the president said that he had to go off to meet Kenya's Olympic team before they departed for Paris. Many users were not satisfied and said that the live interaction was not enough, but surely sets a precedent. Leaders interacting with protesters is a sight not often seen. The social media platform provided a means for live one-on-one engagement with the president. It gave people the opportunity to speak truth to power. Tough issues still remain, but giving people a chance to converse directly with the leaders is significant. Before his X-Space session, Ruto delivered a national address on TV. He announced sweeping spending cuts, which he said were needed because the planned tax rises had been scrapped. Now, these include the dissolution of 47 state corporations and several non-essential cuts for state officials.
We have since, after extensive consultations, struck a middle ground, and we will be proposing to the National Assembly a budget cut of not the entire 346, but a budget cut of 177 billion, and borrowing the difference. Whatever we are going to borrow, the difference, will increase our fiscal deficit from what I intended to be 3.3% of our GDP. It will now go up to 4.6% of GDP.
Ruto last week announced that he will not sign the controversial finance bill and scrap the proposed tax hikes. The tax hike proposal triggered widespread protests and clashes, which resulted in the deaths of at least 39 people, according to the rights group. However, the government has put the number at 25. Ruto says to deal with the lack of cash, the country now needs to borrow heavily while cutting spending across sectors. And onto our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid reports of coups and crises that dominate the headlines from the continent, we get you positive stories that often get overlooked. Our story today is from the Horn of Africa. Lying in East Africa, the region is one of the worst impacted by climate change. Scientists are now using artificial intelligence to predict extreme weather. Now, the Horn of Africa is prone to torrential rain that triggers devastating floods, often leading to the loss of life and livelihood. But an artificial intelligence system is now being put to use to sound timely alerts and weather warnings. And a computer is all that you need to operate it. Our next report gets you more.
Drought, wildfires, torrential rains, floods. Climate change has made extreme weather conditions frequent phenomena. It's impacting countries across the globe. But the Horn of Africa, a region in the eastern part of the continent, is particularly prone to torrential rain. The region, which is home to countries like Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia and Somalia, is vulnerable to devastating floods. Here, nature's fury has been resulting in widespread loss of life and livelihood. But this misery could soon be lessened. Scientists have found a way to minimize damage from floods with timely alerts. They are now using artificial intelligence to predict extreme weather conditions in the region.
If nothing is being done in issuing information or early warning messages regarding these extreme weathers, then we're going to see more people getting vulnerable, more people getting exposed to these extreme weathers, and we're going to have lots of lives being lost, lots of lives being affected, and livelihoods as well.
The United Nations World Food Programme is working to develop an AI weather forecasting system with Oxford University. The Kenyan Meteorological Department and Regional Weather Service ICPAC are also stakeholders in the project that has received backing and support from Google. The AI uses satellite-collected data on clouds and temperatures above them to predict weather.
So for the AI, there is the part where it predicts, but to predict, it needs to first train. And we train on historic observational data. So the input towards our AI device is the weather forecasts, and it's taking these weather forecasts and training to be able to match them to the observed reality based on the state-of-the-art satellite observations and station data that we have.
In developed nations like the UK, weather forecasting is done using supercomputers. The cost of these computers and data gathering stations is high, and in poorer and conflict-ridden regions like the Horn of Africa, affording such equipment could prove to be a distant dream. But scientists now say they can operate their AI forecasting code using just a laptop.
That's the beauty of it, because it's so computationally affordable that we've literally got people running it on their laptop. So you can have this model, and once it's trained, you can just run it on your laptop to produce 50 predictions of all the possibilities of what the future weather is going to look like, which, as you said, would have otherwise required banks and banks of supercomputers.
This system could prove to be a blessing for the Horn of Africa, as predicting weather in this region can prove to be notoriously hard because of the lack of weather stations for observing and recording weather data. The project is still in its pilot phases. It's being operated in Kenya and Ethiopia. The scientists believe that its results are promising. The scientists have plans to roll it out across the wider area.
So we are really confident that AI models can actually improve the forecasting system. So not just at short range, but also looking at from the short range timescales. So by short range, I mean like just a few days, but also looking throughout all the way to a season. If we could really do that, I really think that it could really enhance our early warning systems.
Once the AI system is proven efficient for the entire Horn of Africa, it can be used in other parts of the world as well to combat the challenges posed by extreme weather that's driven by climate change.
Climate crisis is no longer a distant threat. It is our reality, and it's happening right now. There's record-breaking drought in Africa and parts of Asia like China. Floods are ravaging Europe, while countries like India and the US are battling sweltering heat waves. However, we can still save our planet by taking simple yet powerful actions, such as planting a tree. News 18 Network, which is the largest news network in India, has launched Project One Tree. It aims to mobilize people to plant a tree to fight climate change. Our final report explains how even a single tree can make a big difference.
Record-breaking drought in China. Longest ever heat wave in India. Raging wildfires in Australia. Flash floods in Europe. Rapidly melting glaciers. Bigger storms, fiercer cyclones, and widespread destruction. Multiple problems are wreaking havoc across the planet. And there's just one reason: climate change, which is no longer a distant threat. It's a global emergency where we are both the victims and the culprits. For centuries, human activities have exploited the planet's resources and pushed the Earth to the brink. Burning of fossil fuels, wiping out forests, industrial waste, these have all influenced the climate and the planet's temperature, adding huge amounts of greenhouse gases to those naturally occurring in the atmosphere and increasing the greenhouse effect and global warming. Our actions have painted a grim picture for the future. According to the World Health Organization, 3.6 billion people are already living in areas around the world that are highly susceptible to climate change. Every year, environmental factors take the lives of around 13 million people. Between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause about 250,000 additional deaths annually. When it comes to animal and plant species, over 1/3 of them are projected to go extinct by 2050. Today, as we stand in the age of global boiling, it has become imperative for each one of us to compensate for the damage to this planet. And here's how you can do that. You need not become a climate activist. One simple step by each one of us can make this world a better place and help the planet sustain life. You can just start by planting a tree. One single tree provides a day's oxygen for up to 4 people. Trees also absorb various toxins and pollutants and enhance soil strength. They also provide habitat for wildlife and support our well-being. And for people living in cities where air conditioners have almost become a necessity, trees can cool the temperatures by up to 10 degrees. Keeping all of these benefits in mind, News 18 Network, India's largest news network, has launched Project One Tree that aims to mobilize every Indian to plant a tree as a measure against climate change. The movement seeks to raise awareness about environmental conservation and foster collective action towards a greener and more sustainable future. Imagine the difference we can make with just a sapling. If each of us plants just one tree, it would lead to a significant reduction in carbon emissions and improve the health of our planet. Each tree that we plant today will serve as a beacon of hope for our future generations. So, plant a tree today and join the movement to save the earth.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 Network initiative.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching and goodbye.